Well, George Negus and his 60 Minutes colleagues changed the way we view the world. With his insatiable curiosity, trademark moustache and swagger, George covered war zones and tackled big interviews like no one we'd ever seen on television. Today, aged 82, George lost his battle with Alzheimer's, and we lost a legend.
I'm George Negus. I'm George Negus. I'm George Negus. Yeah, all of us probably in the early days, we really thought we were changing the world for better. We failed, but we had a bloody lot of fun trying.
We set out at about 5 o'clock this morning from our base in Algeria.
Why not? Why can't we take photos?
Why?
They describe you as an ex-boozer and womaniser. Ex.
Oh, the X is definitely correct.
For both.
I heard your question.
And that's your answer.
You take a lot of convincing, don't you?
Why do people stop us in the street almost and tell us that Margaret Thatcher isn't just inflexible, she's not just single-minded, on occasion she's plain pig-headed and won't be told by anyone.
Would you tell me who has stopped you in the street and said that?
Ordinary Britons. I thought we weren't going to get out of number 10 Downing Street alive, to be honest. Who is your worst enemy, Mr. President?
America.
America.
So what about the people who see you as a dictator? Is that a word that you will not tolerate?
طبعا عشان أولا يعني هذا اللي يقولها واحد جاهل غبي.
Hayes, and a very good morning to you all, and welcome to George, day one.
Nice to be here.
To be honest, I've always regarded my time on the Today Show as my insomniac period. I mean, what kind of idiot wants to get up at 3 or 4 in the morning every day of his life? Well, 5 days a week anyway, that's mad.
You're regarded as a great mimic.
Yeah, you want me to do you? No, I'm just kidding.
That would be asking too much. When people say to me, when I meet you, you're just like you are on television. I said, no, you got it wrong. On television, I'm just like I am. And if you think you know me, you do.
He was one of the very best. Well, Ian Leslie was one of the original 60 Minutes reporters alongside George Negus, the other, of course, being Ray Martin. While Liz Hayes, a 60 legend herself, co-hosted the Today Show with George in the late 80s. They both join me now. Nice to see you. Liz, we all lost a giant of the industry today. You also lost a dear friend.
Yes, it's a big day. George was a potent human being, and in my life, someone I will never forget. He left his mark, no matter how he was or where he was, and it's not an understatement to say that somebody like George Negus and even Ian Leslie, who is with us today, these are trailblazers. These are people who sort of led us on a path of journalism of the kind that we hadn't seen at that stage, and they're important people in the world of broadcast journalism.
I mean, Ian, you stayed in touch with George till the very end, and his family spoke today about his gracious decline. What are your emotions around the news today?
Well, shock was the first emotion I felt, but then it was followed up by a dreadful emptiness, because I hadn't seen much of George actually in the last 2 years, but I was talking to an editor only last night who spent about half an hour with George just a few days ago. And I said, did George say anything? And he said, no, he just stared into the distance. So I read him a book. So he read for about 20 minutes, and this smile came across George's face. And then Robert left that session. And Kirsty, George's wife, came in, and George said he was a nice fella. And that's extreme. But it was a poignant end. It was a sad end for a man who loved words, who loved speaking, who loved telling a story, and his voice was his lifeblood. That to have been taken away from him for something like 2 years now is just incredibly cruel and very, very sad.
Yeah, I mean, I remember when we all first found out that he was unwell. It was 2018 and it was 60's 40th anniversary dinner, and I just remember he was in great form that night. He was sharing stories as he always did. He was propped up by the bar, the top buttons were undone, there was no tie. It was classic George, and there was really no one like him, Liz, was there?
No, he was truly unique. There was one George and only one George, and that's why, in many respects, he stood out. And you're right, you know, he always liked to have a little bit of chest hair available to pop out. And he was just a good guy, curious beyond belief, always had questions that he wanted answered. It didn't matter what the subject was. I think he perfected the one finger with the coat over the shoulder. I might be wrong, Ian, tell me if I am. He brought huge personality to television, but an insatiable appetite to know more. And really that's what he did so well through his personality and his presence.
I mean, as one of the original three, Ian, on 60, would the show have taken off as it did had it not been for George?
We needed a standout. We needed a spark to get the audience on side. And looking back, there was Ray, myself, we were both conservative. George was certainly not conservative. He was right out there. And we needed a Negus. We needed that sort of urban cowboy. We needed that penetrating voice to get the message out. And I always think that George was the element or the spark that took 60 minutes to the heights that it eventually got to. Liz, we dubbed George the urban cowboy because, as you said, the coat over the shoulder. And we're a little bit jealous of that because none of us could do that. And I thought, gee, it'd be nice to do that. That was George.
George wore a tight pair of white jeans very well too, I thought was extraordinary. And always had it.
Nice that you remember that, Liz.
I couldn't forget. It was one of those visions, you know.
I love what you're saying there, though, Ian. I mean, you and Ray very much were the gentlemen of the show, but George was this renegade. I mean, Liz, I know you once said he was TV's first like rock and roll star journo. That's what he brought, and he showed us all the importance, I think, of being authentic and being fearless.
Well, he was certainly fearless, and he certainly was authentic, and he didn't make any apologies for that, and that's what I think really did cut through. This is the guy that understood a moment too, didn't he, in television, and he created moments, but he was authentic. What you saw was what he was, and he made no apologies for that.
I mean, Liz, you got to sort of sit next to him on the set of the Today Show for a few years there, but Ian, your relationship was very different because you were often on opposite sides of the globe. But then when you, Ray and George would get together for a lunch and the stories would flow, as we know they did you have a favourite George story?
We were like brothers. We had our arguments, but we were never vitriolic about it. There was a camaraderie about the three of us. It wasn't like in the newsrooms where you do anything to beat your colleague to the punch. You had to get your story up. You wanted a complete story. It wasn't the case in 60 Minutes. We would talk about our families. I had two children. George was the gay bachelor. Maybe not gay, but he was a bachelor.
I'm definitely not gay.
I mean, I just think of some of those famous interactions. You got the Margaret Thatcher in 81, that Bob Hawke interview about booze and womanising. Liz, we know he was larger than life. What have we lost today?
Oh, somebody that informed us like we'd never been informed before. Somebody who took us around the world like we hadn't been taken around the world. Somebody who introduced us to much of the Middle East. And the conflicts that took place there are still going on, but he could articulate that. Somebody who could do a mean bowl of pasta. I think we might have lost a great cook, actually. George did it George's way, and it worked.
Yeah, he made us think. Ian, how will you remember your friend?
I've lost a colleague, I've lost a friend, and we've all lost a very fine journalist.
Well, Liz and Ian, thank you so much for sharing those memories with us today.
It's a pleasure.